Well, praise the Lord. Yeah, there's a lot of backstory. It'll take me a couple hours to tell it all. But I missed out on my getting my scholarship in high school, and so I joined the Army. They were needing a lot of volunteers to replace the draftees right at the end of World War II. This was in May of 1946. And I joined the Army. They had a special year and a half enlistment where we could get 30 months GI Bill. That sounded like the best deal. I didn't have any funds my folks didn't either, for me to go to college. So that's what happened. And I asked them, the recruiters, if I could get in the Air Force. That's what I thought would be neat. And they said, well, we'll see what we can do. And I don't know how much they saw about it, but I wound up in the infantry. And they sent me to Fort McClellan, Alabama for my basic training. Well, our training company was on the north side of the camp where the highway went past it. We could see it every day when we were out training. And I found out that highway went to Jacksonville. Well, I'd always wanted to see Jacksonville, Florida. So I thought, this is a good chance I got an afternoon pass. Well, it turned out not to be Jacksonville, Florida, but it was still a very momentous occasion. And I could see the tall spire of the steeple of the First Baptist Church from the bus coming into town. It was an old New England-style church building with the slatted boards going up and down. So I got off up at the square and walked around the church. It was Saturday, nobody was there, but the Lord spoke to my heart and said, if you have a chance, come to church here. And I told him that I would be glad to, but chances are I'd be shipped out in a couple of weeks at the end of basic training. But lo and behold, on the Friday that the orders came out, I was transferred to the motor pool office there on Fort McClellan. And Sunday morning, we'd moved on Friday to the other part of the camp, and on the way back from the mess hall, the Lord reminded me that it's Sunday and you have a permanent pass now, so it's time for you to go to church over there. So, I guess I had my raincoat on already. I don't know if I went by the barracks, but I headed out for church. I had to walk a couple miles because the highway at that time was under repairs. So I walked to the little town next to the camp and caught a ride with a gentleman in an old pickup truck. He was going to Jacksonville, and he took me right to the church door, and I was there in plenty of time for Sunday school. So I went to the young adult department. Now, I was still 18, but I felt like a young adult. Went in and joined the department assembly. My beautiful blonde future wife of 70 years was playing the piano. And for some reason, the director of the group, and I don't know, he didn't know me, but I guess I looked like a straight arrow, and he called on me to lead in prayer before we went to class. My lovely wife said she looked around at me and noticed I was really tall. And she liked that because she liked to wear high heels, and she was pretty tall without them. The fellow that I was in Sunday school class with, he invited me to sit with him in church, and I did that. And at the end of church, he introduced me to his mom, who was a widow lady. She kept house for him, and he brought in the money. And his two brothers, one was a medical student, one was still a chaplain in the Army in Europe. So they invited me home for lunch, and we had a lovely meal, good Southern home cooking. The next Sunday, I took my buddy from my hometown. We were the only two. There were four of us that signed up, were sworn in at the same time, and two of us were shipped out, and Max and I were still on base. So he went with me, and the Bennett family was not there that Sunday morning. But after church, we got out and had a bite to eat and walked around town, went up to the college campus. And as we were walking back toward the main part of town, this car stopped and called to us, and the Bennetts had been back to their hometown in North Alabama for a family reunion. So they invited us to get in and go with them for supper, which we did, and we had a good time playing with the Hal, that's the older brother that was still in the Army, with his two little boys. And I never saw him again, actually, for about 30-some years, close to 40, until Lamar's funeral. And they were there at the funeral, and they remembered me. About that same weekend, the Bennetts, Lamar and his mother, invited us to come and just be part of their family on the weekends. So we had our barber at the Fort McClellan was an African-American fellow, and he lived in Jacksonville, so we had to ride with him every Friday afternoon after work, and we just stayed with the Bennetts for the weekend until after church on Sunday night. Well, getting back to the romance part, that was the last thing in my mind, just admiring my future bride from afar. She was so beautiful and such a good singer. She'd been in several Southern gospel quartets and played for music schools growing up where she was a little girl on the farm. She and her sister took the initiative in being friendly, and I did not turn away from them, you know. I tried to be polite and my usual charming self. After a while, it seemed like Maxine was kind of taking a liking to me, but I wasn't sure because, see, I was still 18 and she was almost 23 by then. And somebody accused her of robbing the cradle, and I guess she did. She said that I was old for my age. So anyhow, her sister was a good friend, and she lined it up for me to be the husband in a Thanksgiving skit and training union with Maxine was the wife. So we had to rehearse quite a bit at their house. And about that time, toward the end of that time, I think we'd already had done this play because I was getting ready to go on Christmas furlough back to Nebraska. The next day, I think it was, and as I was leaving, that was when the momentous history-making kiss happened, and it was all her doings because I wouldn't have had the nerve to try anything like that at that time. And so I flew on a cloud back to Fort McClellan that night, and I found out that she didn't like, I guess like most girls, they don't like for the boyfriend to be telling about things like that to their buddies, so I kept my mouth shut about it, although I wanted to spread the news all over Fort McClellan, you know, but I went home for the two weeks furlough, and her birthday happened at Christmas that year, of course, like it did every year. It's when she turned 23, and I did send her some lovely roses, the most I ever spent on flowers for a girl. In fact, a few years later on furlough one time, I got her a bouquet of red roses, and she fussed at me for being so spendthrifty, you know, not spending money on things like that, because we could get them for a nice bouquet for about $5 in Thailand. But anyhow, that's the start of the story, and I just praise the Lord. There were so many ways that we could have missed out on meeting. It had to be the Lord's doings. And there's a country western song that I love. It's called the Maker of the Stars. And in this song, he talks about how it was no accident that they met, that the Maker of the Stars worked it out ahead of time for them to get together. And so our 70 years has been more than I could ever have dreamed of. And of course, her becoming a missionary and all that was very unexpected. And she had thought that she could never be one because she didn't have any special training or anything. But she had the qualities and abilities and the attitudes to do things in Thailand that were just amazing, as well as when I was still a pastor. When we were dating and thinking about getting married maybe, she told me that she didn't think she could marry a preacher because she had seen the hard life that the pastors' wives had in the little country church where she grew up. That they were always watching to see if the preacher's kids had to clean clothes and behave themselves and their manners and all that. And she didn't really want to go through that. And she suggested one night that, asked me if wouldn't like to be a pharmacist. And I said, well, I wouldn't mind being one, but I don't think that's what the Lord wants me to do. And but she said, you know, they help people too. I said, I know they do, real much, but anyhow, something about the situation, and I don't know if it was my personality, it wasn't my looks, I know, but she came around. I didn't pressure her or anything. It was the Lord put some good thoughts in her head, and it worked out real good for 70 years now. Last time we talked about it, we decided to just go ahead and stick with it. I'm glad I've got that testimony.